We may not win today, gentlemen, but we'll have a good time.
Hello everybody. I just recently got done making these two kind of dice tray accessories to go into the rail and accessory system on my gaming table. In the past I've made the cup holder accessories and these kind of card holder accessories, as well as these kind of player desks that are for like D&D or RPG games. So I wanted to show kind of some of the technicalities of how the system works if you were going to try to make like a rail system like this for a gaming table. Just show you what mechanics are kind of making it work and how I kind of went about making them with these two. So I'll try to do my best to kind of break that down a little bit and focus on this as a little bit of a follow-up video for the gaming table, just really focusing in on the rails and the accessories. So first I'll show you the technical specs of how I made this. So if you're kind of a amateur woodworker or you're a little familiar with this kind of stuff, I think showing you that first probably will get your head around it. If you have questions about it, you'll be able to kind of go from there. I'll do that, and then I'll also do a timestamp for later kind of showing how I made these two, and I'll try to do a little commentary on that and kind of give you some tips or tricks if you're thinking about going about doing a system like this for your own gaming table. So this is the very first cut that you need to make. I do this with a router. I have like a router table, and I just built one into the wing of my table saw. I guess you could do this with the dado stack also, but the point is this is a 1/4 inch wide cut that's a 1/4 inch deep, so it's a perfect kind of 1/4 inch square, and it's set a 1/4 of an inch in off of the very end of the board. So everything you see there is nice and square. This is to scale, and so that's the first one that I make. And the nice thing about this is, like if you did this with a dado stack or the router table, you can run it through on one side and then flip the piece over and immediately do the same thing on the other side. And once you have this set up, you want to just keep it all set up and run all the pieces that you're going to do. Then if you were doing this with the router or dado stack, I just take away what will be the underside of the piece. I just remove all of that material, so it's nice if you kind of keep it at the same height. You could just either move the fence in. You're gonna want like a sacrificial fence if you do that, or you could kind of move the piece back and forth away from the fence to clear out that material there. And then once I've done all of that, I take a little bit out of what is the top it's moving away from the rail, and that helps give it a little bit more clearance. You could also sand down or round down that corner on the very top too. That will help kind of clear it a little bit. But that's a little bit kind of to taste. I kind of do that to make it fit. The way that I think I did most of my pieces was about just 1/8 of an inch, but you could easily go another 1/4 of an inch just to really make it easily clear there. And then the last thing to do is just to round that underside that's going to slide into the rail piece. I usually did this with sanding because I found it was kind of hard to use. I don't know how you would get like a round over bit there. And I just kind of kept a test piece, and I kept sanding it down a little bit and checking the fit, sanding it down a little bit and checking the fit. I also sometimes used like a block plane, could get in there kind of well enough just to start kind of removing a good chunk of material before I was sanding, just to kind of start to give it its shape. But again, between that and like I said, I kind of sanded that top corner piece a little bit. Those are the two places where you're going to get your fit. Those you need to kind of keep working away at until it fits. And the rails are simply one pass with a T-slot router bit. The only thing, the T-slot, I'll put a link to the exact one that I got. I don't think it's the craziest great quality, but I only needed it to last to make my set of rails, and it did. It seemed like it worked fine. I just kind of went really slow with it because it's hogging out a lot of material, but The only important thing to set with the T-slot bit is, since we left 1/4 of an inch, our spaces for this little kind of S curve where the 2 points make contact to hold the piece on the accessories are 1/4 of an inch away. The depth of kind of that throat of the rail, like the opening where it kind of opens to the outside, that needs to be exactly 1/4 of an inch deep if the width of those cuts that you made, the first cuts, the top and the bottom cuts on the accessories piece, is exactly 1/4. Because that's where they're going to make contact, and that's what's going to line it up to be square. I put together a quick animation to try to help visualize how this works. When I keep talking about this S kind of curve or where the points make contact, I just think an illustration like this, there's no replacement for it. And as you can see, as the animation's going, you can kind of see the points where it has to make clearance. And then you can see at the very end, on the accessory piece, at the very bottom, there's kind of this one side of the S. It's the outside of the rail. And then at the top of the S, is kind of curved for the accessory piece, it makes contact with the inside of the top slot of the rail. So you can kind of see that's why that 1/4 of an inch needs to be exactly the same. That's 1/4 of an inch away from each other on the accessory piece, and it's 1/4 of an inch width for the rail. And this, I think, also is a really good illustration to see why we kind of take out material from that curve. We kind of keep sanding away, and we make a little bit of room on the top of the accessory piece to help it clear. I think seeing this animation just kind of helps visualize, hopefully helps you kind of get your head around what needs to be done to make it work. So let's take an overview real quick. These are some blanks that I had made when I was milling up the rails and the accessories. So I have a few. They need a little bit of work still, but the main technical parts of the lip that slot into the rail are already done. And I have another kind of big chunk here. This is just a scrap that I had from way back when I made the table. I tried to seal up some gaps there with some resin just to give it a little more stability, but I think I'm actually going to route that away anyway. Anyway, this is a little bit deeper profile. I think this is like, I don't know, I'm going to have to check here. Oh, fantastic. It's 1.317 inches, so cool. We get to work with nice round numbers today. That's going to be awesome. I think that's actually just a little bit over 1.25 inches, but in any case, we'll need to make a little bit different profile there because it's deeper. This bottom lip that gives it space is going to have to be a lot deeper for this to make up for it. So I'll go over that too. But this is a nice deeper scrap piece that I want to have as like maybe a DM's dice tray where there's just a big scoop of dice. If I'm using, I can kind of go into that, and then some smaller trays for like I think if a player had their sneak attack dice or something else, just some extra places to put those pools of bardic inspiration die, or the fighters to have their superiority, their maneuver dice and stuff like that. So that's what I'm going to be doing. And to get those pieces milled up with the router, to get that kind of carved out, I am just made up a little jig here. We're going to use some scrap plywood. We can set this all around, and then we have a nice template where these edges are going to block the router, and we can just go right around and just route the whole thing out. These blanks are a little bit smaller than the other piece I had. I would rather not make this smaller. I'd rather get as much size out of it as I can. So I'm going to make this one first, scoop it all out, and then probably chop these down at the miter saw and have a go at the smaller template blanks and stuff. So here we go. Let's get to building. All right, this is our setup.
The height that I have it set at is a nice round 0.818 inches. And the depth here is a half of an inch off of the fence. And that's going to give us the cut that we need. So here, this is kind of a router table I've built into the wing of my table saw. So we're just going to take it nice and slow, nice and easy, and just make this cut. Cool. There we go. That's going to be the bottom of where this kind of slots into the rail.
So I think this is a good time to talk about this rail system. This is a couple of test pieces that I have. This is a leftover scrap from when I made the gaming table, and this is one of the first test pieces that I made for it. It wasn't out of walnut or anything, but nothing in my mind beat being able to make these test pieces and mechanically kind of see how they fit together. And as I was trying to round, this bit to make it clear, to be able to see where it was catching, where I needed the most attention to make that work, nothing beat that. So if you feel like you're having a hard time getting your mind around the rail system, like how this works, make some test pieces first. You'll really be able to learn a lot from doing that. Secondly, the most important thing about this is going to be, I kind of started to think about the slots here as an S. So at the top in the accessory piece, there's a little slot that catches on this top bit, right? And then at the bottom, there's a recess off of the rail that this kind of hits against underneath at the bottom. Now the width between where that makes contact up here or down here and on the back side of this upper lip needs to be an exact 1/4 of an inch, because the thickness here is 1/4 of an inch. So if it was any smaller than that, you would not be able to clear this at all. It would never work. If you have that S, those two elements of the S that are more than 1/4 of an inch apart, it's going to be a little sloppy. Instead of sitting nice and square, it's going to really sag. And this piece itself is actually, I think, just a tiny little bit out of square. You can see it does sag a little bit, but that's what kind of helped me learn this. So what I'm going to do is take a 1/4 inch up spiral bit that's already in the router table here, and I'm going to use that as a reference. So if I am going to mill up the top side now to get that top relief cut, what I want to do is bring this fence in until that bottom edge here, the lip that I already created, is right up against the end of that bit, and then I'm going to flip it over. Because I know I need an exact 1/4 of an inch, and this bit is 1/4 of an inch, that makes it perfect. So I'm just going to use the bit itself almost as a reference. Here we go. We'll do that. Just kind of get down there, make sure I'm right up against it, that nothing is a gap. It's making good contact between the bit and the fence. So I'm going to lock down the fence. And we're going to make our next cut. And there we go. That's what we're left with. Let me do a quick check. It won't slide in there because this back isn't rounded. But look at that. There we go. We just need to round off that last little bit there. And then this has a good snug fit. Looks really square. Again, this doesn't necessarily have to be perfectly square, but I like it. I think it came out pretty dang good. There you go. I wanted to show this in a little bit more detail because I bet a lot of people are interested in a rail system, and this to me took the longest time to really get my head around. So I hope this is helpful. So let's take a look at the whole setup real quick. I got a scrap of plywood that's underneath. I'm going to use that. I'm going to screw down those walls, kind of guides for the router, into that. I'm just going to make sure they're up nice and snug against each of the sides. I've made them so that they have enough space that they position the bit where I'm going to route to be kind of centered where I want it. And once they're all locked down with screws into the plywood, I should be able to be good just to route it all out, and then I know that I can never go past those limits where I want my kind of cavity to be for it to hold the dice. And then since this accessory is a little bit bigger, after I do this one, I'm going to have to cut the wall guides kind of down a little bit, and then do the other two since they're a little bit smaller, so it'll fit right. But I just want to show kind of the whole setup that I got here. I put a towel underneath because I want a little bit more traction so things don't slide around. If the plywood was just on the wood of my workbench, I think it would slide as I was trying to route it and stuff. So just a little bit more stability, always a good thing. Whoops, I got ahead of myself. It's been a while since I made a bunch of these rail accessories. So I'm back to looking at this bigger piece here. And the side that's going to face towards the rail, so that's going to slot in, it needs to have a little bit more clearance than just that 1/4 inch space that I did. So I'm going to move the fence back a little bit just so I can, this actually doesn't even matter. Do it to whatever you feel like looks good, but it needs a little bit of play. Like I want to say I gave the other ones like about 1/8 of an inch or so that's extra facing out towards the player so that there's a little bit of space as it kind of goes to slot in as it makes that turn. So I was a little bit further along in the piece. Future self, we'll edit this all together We'll see that in just a second. But I need to kind of go back in a way and make that space a little bit wider on this side to make it be able to fit the rail. Oh, sorry, the light's starting to goof this up, isn't it? So, something kind of like that, just to give it a little bit more room. We'll do some more test fitting later. The way that I did the round over here previously was with the random orbital sander, and I kind of got it started with a little chamfer from block plane, and I'm just going to try to keep accentuating it and testing it against that little spare rail piece to see until I get a good fit, and then I'll call that good. There we go. That's a pretty good fit. Yep. So I might even take it a little bit more than that, because when I put finish on it, it's going to have a little bit of thickness that might make it a little bit. See, I see it still sticks a little bit. So I'll go a little bit more here. So I'm going to do some smaller dice trays out of these blanks. And here's what I got set up. I adjusted the spacers to fit the size of my blanks, those 6-inch squares. And I made this little block to space me out enough to do route out side over here. I can just take the whole thing and just go, and then I'll switch it over to the other side so I can get the other compartment. I should say it's important, I believe, to start in the middle and work your way around, because if you started out and you were working your way in on the material, you'd have less and less to reference the plate of the router off of. So I feel like I'm able to keep it level so that the tray is nice and level if I start kind of in the middle and then work my way out. Now at the end, I'm trying to go through and just even things out, since this is a rounded bit, because I want those nice rounded corners. It's going to leave some bits in the middle that aren't perfectly flush that I'll have to sand down. But also because if there's any shavings that get up against the side where I'm referencing, or if I just didn't get quite a perfectly smooth reference as I was going, I can get a little blip there on the edge. So once it's all cleaned out, I want to go all the way around, maybe even a couple of times, and just also kind of go back and forth real gentle. Now that there's not a lot of material coming off, I can more easily reference off of a smaller support like this, just to kind of clean up those bits and make it as flush as I can before I have to go do sanding. Needs some cleaning up and some work to make sure it fits the rails, and then it's good to go. Well, there you go. That's how I made the rails and accessories for my gaming table. So if you're going to do something like this, I hope that you found it helpful. If you did find the video really helpful, please consider giving it a like or subscribing to the channel. It's the biggest way you can kind of support us right now. And again, I just hope it was helpful. If you have any questions, put them in the comments and I'll do my best to answer them. Thanks for watching.